Hi, this is Ed Fitzpatrick. If you enjoy local politics as much as I do, be sure to join our friends at Rhode Island PBS for the show A Lively Experiment. Hosted by Jim Hummel, the weekly series features journalists, pundits, and politicians debating the stories and issues that matter most to us Rhode Islanders. Tune in to A Lively Experiment and be part of the conversation. Fridays at 7 p.m. on Rhode Island PBS and wherever you get your podcasts. From the Boston Globe, this is Rhode Island Report. I'm Ed Fitzpatrick. Welcome back to the podcast where we bring you big conversations from our very small state. You've heard about how federal cuts to research funding are affecting elite institutions like Harvard and Brown. But what about our state universities? URI President Marc Parlange says these reductions are just as harmful for colleges like his that educate the working class and create innovation in the local economy. He just wrote about the effects of these cuts in a recent opinion article in Science magazine, and he's here to talk with us about it. URI President Marc Parlange, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Ed, for having me.
You recently wrote an opinion piece for Science magazine titled An American Research Crisis with Real Human Consequences. Why did you decide to write this piece?
One, I was invited by the editor of Science, and he was wondering what happens to public research universities who don't necessarily have the history and large funding profile. Proportionately, this is a big impact on us. And so he was wondering, what does it mean for a Research One university like the University of Rhode Island? How will you feel it? And so that was important for me to be able to talk about that.
Hey, yes, tell us, since President Trump returned to office earlier this year, has the federal government cut any research grants for URI?
For URI and for all research universities across the United States, north, south, east, west, the public universities, the private universities. And so grants from USAID, those were the first ones we heard about. And then later, we heard about grants with the NIH, so the Institutes of Health, to the National Science Foundation, the NSF, to even the Department of Defense grants that we've had.
How many grants in total, and what's the dollar amount for URI?
So we've had 25 grants that have been stopped. In total, it's a little over 49 million.
Wow. Could you give us a few examples?
Sure. So I mentioned the Department of Defense grant. That's actually a grant that studies turbulence in the oceans. Some of our projects related to the National Science Foundation have to do with coastal resilience. And some of the grants with the USAID have to do with fishery management. The United States is actually a leader in fishery management in the world's oceans, and the University of Rhode Island plays a key role there. So we help communities from Fiji to Madagascar to Indonesia and the management of fish.
And as you noted in your op-ed, a lot of media attention, including in the Globe, is focused on the cuts and the threats that the Trump administration is making to Harvard. But what's been the impact on public universities like URI?
First of all, I think it's good to remember that the public research universities were really founded in the mid-1800s, and they were really set up to democratize education, to reach out to all communities so that not only the wealthy could go to university, but the working class could go to university. And it continues to this day. At the University of Rhode Island, some 30% of our students are first and family to go to university. 1/4 of our students are Pell eligible. And so it's very important in terms of attracting all members of, Rhode Island to be able to go to URI.
And that's one point you think is getting lost in this whole discussion, right? That the Trump administration rhetoric is talking about these Ivy League elites, but you're saying these public research universities are really the real America.
That's right. It is real America, and it's quite incredible. When you look at the research that has come out of public research universities, the advances in agriculture, the advances in, let's say, weather and storm prediction. We have people at the University of Rhode Island who are the world experts on really modeling and predicting the impact of hurricanes. So how do we prepare for those natural disasters? These are very important areas of research. But we've also helped in many ways with technology. So the advances in new batteries, the advances in smartphones, the advances in polio vaccine. If you go down the list of all the health benefits that have come out of the universities and the advances in biotechnology and so forth, even the research around artificial intelligence today, the mathematics and the electrical engineering work, this has been very important, this research that comes out of public research universities.
And the Globe has written about how the Trump administration abruptly froze $2.2 billion in the research grants for Harvard. And that sounds like a lot, but are the URI cuts proportionally larger? I mean, you don't have a Harvard-size endowment, right?
No, we don't. I wish we did, but we don't.
Not yet.
We're certainly working on that, and I'm grateful to the support of our alumni base in helping us. But yes, it is felt proportionately larger. Our research grants roughly that we spend each year is about $162 million. When you write a grant to the NSF or the NIH, first of all, you have to have a proven track record. And then your research proposal has to be very interested. It's peer reviewed. It's probably a dozen people. It then goes before committees. And then often less than 10 or 8% of the grants that were submitted get funded. So it can be heartbreaking for a researcher who has poured years of study and really a lot of effort to prepare a great research idea to suddenly have it disappear.
And will you have to lay off any employees at URI because of these grant cuts?
So if staff members have been paid entirely on what we call soft money, meaning off of grants, then there have been 11 colleagues who have lost their positions. Now, we've worked very hard to find other opportunities within the University of Rhode Island for those colleagues, and we will do everything we can to support them. We have also been really grateful to alums who have stepped up and provided philanthropy to be able to support our undergraduates and graduate students who are on grants that have disappeared, and to at least help them get through their studies here at URI. So far, warm thanks to our alumni and their support.
We'll have more with URI President Marc Parlange after a quick break. When you want to go beyond the headlines, let me recommend Rhode Island PBS Weekly. Rhode Island PBS Weekly is an award-winning news magazine broadcast that gives you the full story, powered by investigative journalism and narrative storytelling. New episodes of Rhode Island PBS Weekly drop Sundays at 7:30 p.m. on Rhode Island PBS. Watch past episodes at ripbs.org/weekly. That's ripbs.org/weekly. As you know, my son's going to be a freshman at URI in the fall. So how do these cuts affect this young generation, that class of 2029?
These impacts will have real human consequences. They will definitely impact the opportunities for our students. One of the things that I talk to parents when they're coming with their children thinking about coming to URI is that a lot of our students get involved in research projects. More than half of our students will spend a year, 2 years, maybe multiple years, actually working with research projects, working with graduate students and faculty, starting their own research projects. And a lot of those early stage startup research projects really came because there was the strong federal support of our grants in the first place, and those created pathways. So this is going to have consequences for all Rhode Islanders.
Yeah, will these cuts have an impact on the ability of not just URI, but other public universities to attract students? I mean, can they go to college in other countries? That competitiveness.
That's an interesting question, Ed. So I have to say that I believe quite strongly that the greatest thing America brought the world was its research university. And really, 1950, after World War II, with the start of the National Science Foundation, funding this partnership between government and universities and industry, it created an incredible atmosphere of free inquiry for research and science in America. And we attracted to the United States the very best PhD students, not only from the United States, but from around the world. And so if you go back to the 50s, the main draw, you could say, was students that came from Europe, maybe from Canada. But then over time, it grew. There were students from Asia, from South America. They came and they studied here. There's two things that you will see today. If you look at some of the big companies out there, they're very successful technology companies. The leaders of these companies, the people that really started these companies, were international students that came to the United States, studied here, and then made their way and created new opportunities, new jobs. And so that's going to be an impact. I see it in, early stage startup companies and attracting companies to come to want to work with the university. So there's going to be impact there as well.
The Globe's sister publication, Stat, just reported that a university in the French city of Marseille just launched a 15 million euro program to recruit U.S. scientists. So what does that tell you?
It's significant. I think what's actually going to happen, and I'll just speak from a personal point of view. I'm a Rhode Islander. I was born here. I'm really happy to come home to URI. But I did spend quite a bit of my career in Switzerland, in Canada, at the University of British Columbia, and in Australia at Monash University. The overseas universities all tried to model themselves after the American Research University. And I will say, with all due respect to my colleagues overseas, they never quite found that ingredient, that special ingredient that, made in America was so strong and important at the research universities. And I think one of the things that was important was we were attracting really the best and the brightest to come to the United States. The best and the brightest, if we don't make it straightforward for them to come, can end up going to Europe, can go to Canada, can go to Australia. And of course, from my Canadian friends, I'm hearing about a major uptick, not only of international students applying, but actually of American students applying to go up there.
What reaction have you received to your op-ed?
Colleagues from across the country said, yeah, that's what we're seeing, Marc. And that story has to be told about the public research university and the role they play in American society and creating pathways for all Americans. And it's definitely been well received, and certainly from alumni as well to the University of Rhode Island. People who have read the article certainly say, okay, I didn't appreciate it. And it gets back to your earlier point, Ed. Certainly we've heard quite a bit about the impact on certain, let's say, elite private universities, but the fact that this is happening across all universities, that story had not necessarily been told.
So what's your message to the federal government about what should be done going forward?
As you can see, I'm passionate and I believe in the role of the research university. One, for the education of our students, create new opportunities. The ideas of the future will come out of the universities. The health and the economy of the United States and just our strength as a nation really has been based on the developments that have come out of the research universities. Companies want to hire our graduates. Companies are attracted to coming to Rhode Island because they know they can hire our graduates who are well prepared, who are creative, who have the fundamentals, but also have the skills to really advance and bring new ideas to the companies. So that's an important part of the economy of the United States. We won't see it immediately, but we'll start to see it over the coming months And certainly over the coming years, the impact is going to hurt the economy ultimately of the United States.
All right, President Marc Parlange, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Rhode Island Report is a production of the Boston Globe. Today's episode was produced by Megan Hall. Our music is from APM. Be sure to follow us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. I'm Ed Fitzpatrick. See you next week. Looking to binge watch all your favorite PBS shows? You need Rhode Island PBS Passport. Masterpiece, Antiques Roadshow, Rhode Island PBS Weekly, and many more. Watch them all, anytime, and from any streaming device. Learn more about this member benefit at ripbs.org/passport. That's ripbs.org/passport.